Hello everyone. In this video, we will be discussing about non-traditional machining process subject module 1. So, particularly three important and basic topics we will be discussing in this video. What all they? So, here we will be discussing about introduction to non-traditional machining process, what is the need for non-traditional machining process, and comparison between non-traditional machining process and traditional machining process. We shall move to the first slide, that is introduction to the non-traditional machining process. We know that generally manufacturing processes can be broadly divided into two groups. We can call it as a primary manufacturing process and secondary manufacturing process. So everyone is aware of what is primary manufacturing process and secondary manufacturing process, because in the first 2 years, even in some of the labs, we used to do these kind of the machining process. We have a lathe machine, and even in a workshop lab also we have performed some of the operations. So all those the basic of processes will come under the primary manufacturing process, and here we can say that primary manufacturing process usually provide basic shape and size to the material as per the designer's requirement. Here the design should be given to the person who will be doing the particular shape and size. Example, we can call it as a casting, forming and powder metallurgy, which is very common. Even an unskilled person also can able to do this one. So that is why we call this as a primary manufacturing process. Then moving to the secondary manufacturing processes, where we will be providing the final shape and size with tighter control on the dimension and surface characteristics. So what is the meaning of dimension surface characteristics tighter control? Means where even though the tolerances is permitted when we are doing the manufacturing process, but as much as possible we try to do like the exact dimensions whatever is provided, even without compromising the tolerances value also. And even about the surface characteristics, the major reason behind the traditional machining and non-traditional, whatever the machining process we call it, where the first things are, we can call it as a drawback. What we will be feeling is the thing, but the surface characteristics usually based on the material, the surface hardness or the roughness, that leads to the much complications. So in secondary manufacturing process, where we'll be giving importance to the shape and size with accurate dimensions of the surface characteristics. And here further the material removal process are mainly the secondary manufacturing processes. Here the material removal process are mainly divided into two major groups, that is conventional machining processes and non-conventional machining processes. Even we can call it as traditional machining process and non-traditional machining process. As you are aware, this subject is fully about non-traditional machining process. So since we are very much aware of what is a conventional machining process, or like in other words traditional machining process, we are not discussing much about the conventional machining process. Instead of that, we will be comparing the major it may be the process, it may be the principle, it may be the output, the shape, size, surface roughness, whatever you call. So mainly we will be classifying all those things, and we will be just noting down the drawbacks of the conventional machining process and how to overcome all those drawbacks in the non-traditional machining process. In the varieties of process we will be discussing. So just a recap, like we know that conventional machining process are mostly we will be removing the excess material in the form of chips by applying the forces on the workpiece or the work material, usually with a wedge shaped cutting tool or a like a very sharp cutting tool, like whatever thing based on the application. Usually the workpiece the material and the tool material we should give the importance, where the tool material should be usually harder than the workpiece material. And we can say like the many examples for the conventional machining process, examples turning, boring, milling, shaping, broaching, slotting, grinding, etc. Even like many basic shapes also we have we can include in this. Then moving to the non-traditional machining processes, it is very very important, and starting from the definition, everyone should be aware of non-traditional machining process. We can define non-traditional machining process as a group of processes that remove excess material by various techniques involving mechanical, thermal, electrical, chemical, or combination of all these things. In the sense like mechanical plus thermal, thermal plus electrical, or electrical plus mechanical, or mechanical plus chemical, or thermal plus chemical. Like that, varieties of combinations are usually provided of all these combined energies. But we are not using any kind of the short cutting tools, since the non-traditional machining process doesn't demand that one. And what are the various non-traditional machining process? Abrasive jet machining, electrical discharge machining, electrical chemical machining, laser beam machining, electron beam machining, you can able to see. So all these, like some of the examples I have just listed here. So all these things you can able to see here. Usually it is a combination of minimum of two energies. And moving to the next topic. So what are the needs for the non-traditional machining process? So needs are very very important. Why we need to go with the non-traditional machining process when already we have conventional machining process? In case of the conventional machining process where the extremely hard and brittle materials are difficult to machine, so that is the major like a reason for moving to the non-traditional machining process. And even in case of the traditional machining process where the workpiece like should be too hard, but here that is not the case. Here the workpiece can be too flexible, and even we can call in other words it can be too slender also. To support only you need no support for the cutting or the grinding process. Here that is not at all the case in non-traditional machining process where the workpiece and the tool, like all these things, it need not to be like harder or like it should be like very tough. Such kind of restrictions are not there. And the next thing is, what is the next need for the non-traditional machining process when the shape of the part is too complex, which is practically very difficult in the, for example, lathe machines. If you take whatever the operations we are looking for, it may be a turning, facing, broaching, whatever. But the complicated shapes, which is very very difficult in the traditional machining process, but here it is very easy, I can say. Very easily we can able to do, and very interestingly we will be discussing the different processes too. What are all the like a different non-traditional machining process will be using to making this, that also will be discussing. And next one is intricate shaped blind hole. So you can able to see I have highlighted this one example, like a square hole of 15 mm into 15 mm with the depth of 30 mm, exactly making this dimension. There is a intricate shape, that is we call it as a blind hole, which is very very difficult in the traditional machining process, but easily we can do this in the non-traditional machining process. And the last and important one, that is the deep hole with a small hole. Example, a diameter of 1.5 mm hole with like a 1 by d of the 20. So you can able to see, you can imagine how complicated and very like the very small hole we can able to see. And the last one is the thing, but the composite. Usually if you go with the traditional machining process, the composites and all, it is not at all easy to like a machine. So these are all the major needs of the non-traditional machining process, and we can say like the drawbacks what we face in the traditional machining process, which we can overcome in the non-traditional machining process. So this is a very very important topic. Like as a student, as an engineer, you should remember this. Not necessarily for the examination purpose, but generally you should be aware of all these things. Then moving to the like the last topic, which is very very important one, that is the comparison of traditional and non-traditional machining process. You can able to see almost all these things we have discussed just now. Just quickly we'll rush up. In traditional machining process where the macroscopic size chip formation and there may be a physical tool present, but in case of a non-traditional machining process, microscopic chip formation and they not be physical tool. Example here, cutting tool, and here like there is no such kind of things. And the cutting tool usually should be hardened in the workpiece at room temperature and machining condition. But here there need not be any physical tool present, except in one process that we call it as an electrochemical machining process. Okay, so that is the only thing. And next one is the material removal takes place due to the cutting action, and it falls in the mechanical energy domain. But here that is not the case. They fall in the different energy domain. Example, mechanical, thermal, chemical. And the next one is the direct contact of tool and work. Just now we discussed, but here there is no direct contact of, in case even the tool will not touch at all. That is why we call it a no direct contact. And compared to the accuracy, here it is very lower, and even surface finish is also not good. But here higher accuracy and surface finish. And the tool life is less due to the higher surface contact and wear. But here, since it is not at all touching with the workpiece, the tool life is more. And the higher waste of material due to the high wear, but here the lower waste of material due to the low wear. And well, the one drawback in the non-traditional machining process may be the capital investment, but comparatively it is very less. Of course, it is expensive, but comparatively it is very less in the traditional machining. And easy setup of the equipment in case of the traditional machining process, since many processes are many like concept we are using here, the setup is little complicated. So this is the major differences between the traditional and non-traditional machining process. Thank you.